Yeah, you were working on deep in thoughts on how regulatory frameworks can actually attract or not attract the private sector in mini grid deployment in Tanzania, and you will share with us today. And yeah, I have a personal interest in that we stick to the time limit of about 10 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes of discussion, always opened by one of your co-presenters, as I will be happy to present the final paper here about a technology. I'm Nikolas. I'm working as a research associate at the Department of Energy Systems on topics from about 100% decarbonizing of island energy systems. And when it comes to 100%, at some point we talk about hydrogen. And so will I today. I will introduce a little bit hydrogen into the field of mini grids in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think with this very short introduction, I would kindly like to ask our first speakers in this term, Marco and Guglielmo, to present a paper on establishing local power markets and enabling financial success to solar and photovoltaic technologies. We are very excited to listen to your talk and learn from your experience. So please feel free to share the screen now, and yeah, at the end, then Charles or Georg, please act as a discussant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see the screen?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Well, the paper will present some the findings of the project Solar Finance for All, which we say is the last of a series of projects that Associazione Microfinanza Sviluppo, in partnership with several partners, and especially Microfinanza, which is another, I would say, a partner company working with Associazione Microfinanza Sviluppo in the field of financial inclusion. I say this is the last of a series of projects where some models to link up the provision of financial services and the provision of solar, so in any case, renewable energy technology in rural areas has been investigated and to a certain extent implemented. So there was the opportunity, I would say, to make a check on this progress, which we still feel as a progress towards the good option and good solutions. The project was run in Tanzania, in two districts in Tanzania, Malini and Kilombero, in partnership with the TAREA, which is the Tanzania Renewable Energy Association, and with some association related to the Science Museum in Trento in Italy, so Associazione Mazzà, which is an association implementing projects, especially in Tanzania, and Nadir. Well, as said, the process access the issues of access to energy in rural Tanzania. So what's the context? What was the context in 2018 at the beginning of this project? We ran from 2018 to 2020. Well, there is a problem of access to energy in rural population in Tanzania. Only 18% of the people were reached at the beginning of the project, compared to a 66% of people reached in urban context. So there is an issue of exclusion in rural communities. The same issue of exclusion runs also for financial services, because actually 75% of the people were excluded at the last FinScope evaluation in 2017. So these two aspects are two elements that had to be addressed in our opinion. The situation of electrification in Tanzania, there is a very, very big player, the national grid, which is called TANESCO, which supplies 98% of the energy in the countries, mainly through hydroelectric plants as the main source of energy. There is a national electrification plan that aims at connecting 75% of the people by 2033, which runs both on whose main strategy is the expansion of the national grid TANESCO. So the logic is to go for a national grid rather than to go for off-grid solution. But of course, branching the very rural and isolated areas in some parts of Tanzania is actually a challenge, will take time, effort. And so off-grid is going to be an option, an alternative for a certain period. Funny, as we said, off-grid and solar does not cover a very big part of the market. Only 2% of the population is run by this solar off-grid, but as we said, it can play its role in this process of electrification of the country. The market is a private, mostly a private market by especially international suppliers and some Tanzanian suppliers. Providing different technologies also with different payment systems. So there is the standard provisional system. There are the companies who experiment and pay-as-you-go models to different levels. I would say there is also an issue of the quality of the technology. So there is a variety of suppliers, so they supply good and low quality systems. And of course, the spread of low quality systems has an effect in terms of trust of the people on the effectiveness of the solar technology compared to the standard hydroelectric. And on the other hand, even the pay-as-you-go models are a pretty rigid model, I would say, for the final user. That means that in order to be manageable at distance and to have the possibility to switch off the systems that are provided with the pay-as-you-go technology, they are pretty standardized with a certain type of, for example, of battery, which is not very easy to substitute in case of damage and whatever. So there is still a dependency between the client and the supplier of the energy, even after the purchase of the technology. What is the theory of change of the intervention that we made? The objective is somehow very ambitious, but it still stick to the local context that we were working in. The idea is to address several aspects of the creation of a market of solar and photovoltaic technology, and namely the issue of the demand of technology, the issue of the supply of the financial services that may be necessary to purchase a good solar photovoltaic technology, the issue of the supply mechanism of the technology itself, so a way to make good quality systems available at a reasonable flat price on the field, and also the issue of having the services in the field. So do not depend for installation and maintenance to external suppliers, but find the services in the village, I would say. So the theory change was to address local community with the awareness raising activities, actually to build up an awareness on the good and bad quality systems, on the features of the systems, and so therefore the creation of a demand, also the reinforcement of a demand for this technology, for the solar photovoltaic technology. We consider both in terms of quality, but also with an element of environmental conservation. For the issue of financial services, we addressed the village community banks, providing financial education and reinforcing the capacity of this local organization to provide the services to their members who want to purchase, to make the investment in this case in solar and photovoltaic technology, but in general in improve the energy that they have at home. Of course, money to purchase energy depends on the possibility to have this technology. So still together with the community, village community bankers, with TAREA, the Renewable Energy Association, the retailers, we worked on make this technology more easily accessible, even in the rural areas, both facilitating the supply of good devices and the creation of the rotating fund to buy and reimburse and then buy again, I would say, these technology devices. And finally, for after sales services, we addressed the communities working for the creation of technicians who were in place, available and able to create, to provide the services. So addressing all these aspects should create a situation where the people demand for the services and can understand what the good and bad services are, the people have access to the good quality products, and also if they need, they can have also some financial services to purchase the technology. And finally, that for the installation and maintenance program, they can find the service in place and at a reasonable price. The strategy to make this in the context we were working in was to use, I would say, the village community banks as an entry point. Village community banks are what can be partially associated to village loans and savings associations. So it's a tier 4 microfinance institution. They are a semi-formal institution in Tanzania, and that means even if they work as group with the informal regulations, they are registered, they can be registered, and the one we were working with were all registered association. They can be an interesting they were an interesting counterpart because somehow they represent actually the rural community. They are a very widespread way to save money and get loans, so they do not address the specific segments of the community. The possibility to work with the community allowed us to have a multiplier effect, because we could work with the leaders of this community or these village community banks, and then they could spread the market, the messages and the services to their members. Usually village community banks have 3 leaders, and there are groups of about 25 to 30 people. And finally, it was interesting to our approach that proposing financial services to buy solar technology is within the framework of groups of savings, and it also somehow it is not it was a way to introduce the approach to invest in solar technology, in any case starting from a savings attitude and an attitude to create and promote I would say the building of assets, the people. Just easily how they work. Village community banks, they are groups of people who save regularly, so every week or every month a certain amount of money. At each meeting they choose a person who can get, one or more person who can get the loan, and they reimburse usually in 3 to 6 months. At the end of the year, people share both all the savings that they put into the Vicoba, and also they divide the interest. So they, I would say, almost empty the box, just keeping some money for running expenses, and then start a new cycle.
Marco, sorry for interrupting. We have the 10 minutes now, so
the 10 minutes. So
please you to come to.
I will get, there are 2 more slides. I will do it very, very quickly.
Perfect.
In terms
thanks.
of outputs, in terms of awareness raising, we work mainly on demonstrative events and installations. In terms of financial inclusion, there were 40 Vicoba included. They run after a process of financial education. In the end, I would say 21 Vicobas were still in the process in the process of the loan mechanism, which is what access to technology. So there was created a revolving fund. So lanterns were distributed to the people. They pay back to the Vicobas. The Vicobas reimburse the cost to Tarea, the cost of purchasing transport. They keep the interest for the operation expenses, and as soon as the fund is rebate, a new cycle of distribution was available with the same logic. And finally, 7 technicians have been trained, and 2 cooperatives were incorporated and trained. In terms of lessons learned, what was interesting findings? In terms of awareness, we found that there is some kind of certain knowledge on the process, but still the capacity to detect the good and bad system was not so clear. So I would say awareness is never enough. In terms of financial inclusion, we saw that Vicobas were a good multiplier effect in order to provide small-scale technology like solar lanterns, while in terms of bigger systems like solar home systems, they are maybe too small structures. So the investment is a little bit overscale for the standard capacity to provide loans. So that is, I mean, it can be a support for people who in any case can afford this expense. So how this is the findings. In terms of technology itself, so we saw that lanterns as a useful complement, I would say, to other sources of energy. Lanterns were used mainly to let children study, and especially to provide light into the country house, so the small hut that the people use to work in the fields, and so where they spend period some weeks in the harvesting or in the planting season. While in general, I would say that the comparison with the TANESCO with the national grid is only partial in terms of price. That is not really business case, I would say, to go for solar technology rather than to adopt the national grid. But what happens is that because the grid is in any case more powerful, but it's subject to power cuts, which is also why the people were interested to complement it with the solar technology. But we can go further in question on this aspect, which is one of the most interesting. Finally, in terms of business case, we found that for a cooperative technician, that might be a business case to create this thing. So even in a very, very rural village, because Malini is a very isolated place, it was the members of the cooperatives were able to build up a significant capital from their work. So it is a good second job. So all of them are farmers. They build up this technology, and they are actually able to have work, especially in the off season from agriculture, and they are able to have an interesting income. I would not go further on findings. I thank you for the attention. Sorry for using my 10 minutes. And we invite you also to visit our website in any case to have some more information.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to ask Georg or Charles to.
Yes, thank you, Nikolas. Marco, Guillermo, thank you very much for this presentation, and also for your paper. You have actually sent us already a full draft, I think. I would suggest that I go briefly through my comments, because I think it's also a nice summary on the paper. And if we still have then time for questions, for further questions, I think that that we will have then afterwards. So I have received your paper and also now seen your presentation. Very interesting. I got really well introduced in the introduction on Tanzania. So I like the structure. The sources are very well chosen and to the point. Regarding the methodology, I actually, as I'm a junior researcher, I'm new to this theory of change, but it's well outlined. I have understood the principles. The survey is very rich, and I think that is one of the key benefits of this paper, that you really have empirical data, that you have been on site, as you have also explained during the presentation. So I felt a little bit that it comes a bit too short. So maybe you have to look at it again and see that you can really emphasize it a little bit more in the paper, that you have interviewed people, and especially maybe, and that's one perspective here from the methodology, that there, I think you have like 199 qualitative interviews. For the perspective of the results, it could be useful to learn at what point you have interviewed them. At the end of your intervention, if you have like, if you had different survey groups, let's say, or intervention time points, that would be maybe an add-on another. Results, yeah, that's very relevant actually. I think it is that behavioral change cannot be introduced or only triggered by solar lights. I think it's a very relevant result, and also about financing mechanisms, that they have to be flexible. That is indeed also very relevant, and I think you have elaborated quite well. Overall, the results are to the point, well organized. One point I had, and that's maybe my question here for also for the group, for our session here. Have you looked at the challenge, and I think you have mentioned it a little bit in your results, about microfinance institutes and adapting renewable energies, maybe in this context or in general? Because what I have learned from my research, there's, I think, a fundamental conflict somehow, that microfinance institutes, especially in East Africa, are not really keen to adapt renewable energy technologies as a financing or it's a consumer loan in their portfolio. Maybe you can elaborate on it and and your perspective. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, I would say there is a challenge on that, clearly, and somehow also the decision to work with the Vicoba on a first extent actually runs from this limit. We actually, I say, this is the last of a series of projects where an qualitative, I would say, needs assessment in 2016, just to understand what could be the right counterpart. And still there is both level. There is difficult incapacity, I would say, so far for many financial institutions to adopt renewable energy as a standard product. On the other hand, there is some skepticism from the point of view of the client to go for a financial institution in order to take a loan from this for this kind of energy. In one of the two contexts, the financial MFIs, microfinance institutions, are not really so much present. So that's one of the reasons why we go to community groups in order to test whether they can be a good channel for all the necessary financial products. And also the option is that in that case, it's not only an issue of loans, it's also an issue of working on a savings groups and how also maybe regular savings can be a way to get to the capital, which is necessary to purchase a solar technology. So we would not put the only attention on loans, which are a necessary way, I would say, to spread the investment over time, but it can be mixed up with the savings. But what we remarked is that the Vicobas are an interesting counterpart, but actually the investment is a little bit over-dimensioned for what they can really provide in the context where we were. The loans of these groups go about 600,000 up to maximum 1 million shillings, while the investment on a good systems goes from 1.5. I mean, you can get some small systems. I'm talking about solar home systems, so not the lanterns. Where in the lanterns it really worked well. So people are used to get low quality lanterns at 20,000-30,000 shillings, and they were able to buy good quality lanterns at 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 shillings. So this works very well. If you want to make the second step here, you go again on this challenge. And I mean, the logic to work on financial education and savings is that, yes, MFIs can adapt. On the other side, you as a consumer can also, I mean, see whether the investment is reasonable and affordable with the services that exist without, I mean, I would say, be obligated with the real necessity of tailored financial products. The tailoring so far is made by technology providers who provide financial services. So basically they pay as you go systems, which has actually an increase in the price, which is pretty relevant. But somehow it can be in the market. I mean, I would say that it brings you also keeps the link to the provider. If there is some problems with payments, really a little bit difficult to have an interaction to make stops and go in provision of energy. So, and also you have this pretty rigid systems. So for example, if you want to go for a small system and then upscale to a bigger system, this is difficult if you have the pay-as-you-go technology. While if you purchase a system that you can add a battery, add some systems, and that would make it a little bit more flexible. So actually, yes, I would say a further step would be to really open the discussion with some standard financial service providers and try to find the matchup, I would say, the point of equilibrium.
Yeah, it's very interesting actually, and it's also interesting to see also the pay-as-you-go part in Tanzania with these big players as Mobisol and Off-Grid Electric or Solar, who have actually contributed and also challenged the sector as well.
Yeah, I'm eager to hear about the other the other paper, because that was like a side issue in our analysis, just in terms of comparison, but we did not enter exactly into the issue. So I'm interested about hearing that.
Yeah, that was very brief results from my part. Maybe we have more time then, of course, to go through it bilateral. But if there are any other questions.
Maybe if I could ask one, if this is to be answered very quick, but I'm not sure about this. You mentioned you have, if I got this right, you have a similar project or approach, Marco, in Namibia, right? If I understood right, and my question would be, for such projects in both theory and actual carrying out, where would you see, considering the different contexts, what are things you can standardize in your approach and things that are completely new for every context from your experience?
No, well, this we don't have another project in Namibia. Actually, I would say the type of calculation comes from a project which was in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and Ghana in 2012, 2014. Standardization is the standardization is starting from market research and putting, I would say, information together between the financial institution and the technology provider. And this put together the information is the challenge.
I think we are at the opposite stage of standardization, maybe, because the VCOBA represents a good entry point for other technologies. So we worked on the market for solar and photovoltaic technologies, but it could be interesting to see the comparison with other sources and solutions. So, yeah.
For instance, one of our partners, Mazingira Association, works also in the issue of efficient cook stoves. We just made a small part of the analysis, which is not in the paper, just also to see the adoption of cook stoves, but that, which is also another, it can be a critical issues.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, and now we will, Georg, we will again then listen to you, right? Or Charles?
Charles is taking off, I think, right? Starting.
Okay, so then Charles, stage is yours, and thank you again for this, Marco and Guglielmo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We can see your slides and hear you very well. So
thank you. Right. Our paper is about identifying approaches to universal electricity access in Eastern Africa. This is just a general overview of structure. And I'll just jump right into it. Of course, with the new Sustainable Development Goals, a lot of countries in Sub-Saharan Africa making an effort to reach the 2030 universal electricity access target. And it's been realized that these targets will only be reached by combining both off-grid and on-grid approaches. And off-grid here, I mean standalone solutions and mini-grids, and on-grid approaches, of course, your typical grid densification, grid extension approaches. And also, it's going to be a combination of actors, both private and public. Now, historically, most analysis that's done on electrification is done by separating the actors and separating approaches. So separately considering private actors, or separately considering public actors, or saying we're going to focus on mini grids, or saying we're going to focus on analyzing standalone solutions. However, if the future of electrification is going to be a combination of approaches, a combination of actors, then it means we need to rethink how we do this analysis, especially considering that this combination of actors and approaches will result in or implies interrelationships between different actors and different approaches. And so our approach in the paper is to then look at a way of collectively analyzing the electrification industry. And to do that, we apply a theory that was developed by Frank Gills, called the triple embeddedness framework theory. And so how we do this is that if we consider the actors in the delivery of electricity access, irrespective of whether they're public or private or what approach they're using, and we say that they all deliver or all trying to deliver similar good or service, then we can conceptualize them as a collective entity, that is, as firms in the electrification industry. And then broadly ask the question of what then shapes or influences the electrification industry. And according to Gills, firms and industries are shaped by industry regimes, and they're influenced by external environments, and here specifically economic and social political environments. And so the objective of the paper is to apply this triple embeddedness framework theory to understand how firms are shaped by the industry regimes and influenced by external environments, and then understand the causal mechanisms. And talk about this later. And by understanding the causal mechanisms, then we can identify what needs to change for firms to substantially reorient and recreate themselves to be more effective at delivering electricity access. Right. Just to give a general overview of the scope of the paper and what we are going to review. So the paper is covering 5 Eastern African countries: Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Kenya. We basically review national electrification plans and strategies developed by the national governments of these countries. We look at World Bank reports, which are basically programs to do electrification through different approaches in these countries. We also look at market studies, market analysis done by different entities like the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, the IFC World Bank Lighting Program, etc. And then we also review academic literature related to electrification in Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. So I think just to give a quick background on the theory that we apply, remember I said that the theory considers 2 components, the industry regime and also the external environment. So the industry regime consists of 4 elements: core capabilities, so technical knowledge and competence of the firms; mindsets that shape the interpretations of external environments and influence the strategic choices and decisions made by firms; industry mission and identity, the beliefs that actors have about themselves and their role in society; and policies and regulations, which facilitate actions in certain directions rather than others. So the industry regime can result in lock-in mechanisms. So essentially, layman's term, to use an analogy of preventing us from thinking outside the box. So core capabilities can turn into core rigidities. Mindsets can blind actors to developments outside their focus. Mission and identity sometimes are easier to rationalize than change, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And policies and regulations provide incentives that facilitate actions in specific directions other than instead of others. And this can then create the situation where firms are struggling to think outside. The other elements that influence firms are the economic and social political environments. And firms are continuously responding to these environments by either positioning themselves, defending themselves against these environmental pressures, attempting to shape the environment, or reorienting or recreating themselves to fit with. Now, reorientation involves substantial changes in technology and market strategy. And recreation, in addition to reorientation, also entails substantial changes in core beliefs and values. And reorientation of firms typically requires increasing pressures from economic and social political environments, without which firms are likely to be locked into existing industry regimes. Typically, the pressures first emerge in the social political environment and then spill over into the economic. Now, the next two slides I'll hand over to Georg. These are just it's based on a literature review of other two papers, some other two papers that have applied TEF to electrification. Over to you, Georg.
Georg, you're muted, sorry.
I already talked like for 2 minutes. Okay, sorry.
I was searching you in the chat, sorry.
Now I have to really hurry up. But thank you, Charles, for giving me handing it over to me. I just wanted to briefly add these two slides because this first slide is an application of the triple embeddedness framework. It actually shows quite well how you can use it in order to describe the different actors and the landscape. You see it in the top that you, for example, see very well the role of the funding agencies. You have the technology development, the private sector, the political climate, all kind of working into the regime, which is basically, in this case from Sergi, it looks at Kenya and the perspective that there was originally vertical integration and an on-grid focus. And of course, over the time, utilities have unbundled. Grid extension is still prioritized. So that's basically the conclusion of his paper. And of course, there are niche actors like the solar PV market, the upcoming pay-as-you-go perspective, and also investment in microgrids at the bottom. You can see how it's slowly also integrating or influencing the regime. Next slide, please. Charles. Hello, Charles. The next slide, please. Yeah, so having seen the framework, just to summarize, we actually reviewed the literature. The triple embeddedness framework has been used a lot in energy transition studies. In the energy access space, we have figured out two principal studies. The mentioned Sergi study from 2018, focusing on Kenya and Tanzania and the on and off grid situation, and trying to use the triple embeddedness framework to really show the interconnection between the financing and the energy sector. And the second relevant or very relevant study for our work is from the dissertation from Bahamidi Pati from 2019. She looked specifically at the solar PV market in East Africa. She focused on transitional actors and especially aid agencies and transnational actors like bigger off-grid companies. And we want to actually position ourselves, our work in their line, but really want to focus more on an integrating approach. So we really want to synthesize the situation and trying to come up with a general perspective on East Africa and the energy sector in regards to energy access. So in order to build on the current on the research what have done, and we see that the lack of current research is that we don't have sufficient evidence on the combined approaches. So really bringing on and off grid together, but especially also national electrification strategies and private sector approaches. Thank you, Charles.
All right, thank you, George. I will wind up by basically giving an overview of how we have applied. This is initial because this our paper is still under development. This is preliminary application of the triple embeddedness framework to the electrification industry in Eastern Africa. So the first thing is to ask which are the firms in the electrification industry. And you could think about 5 key categories. You have electrification agencies who are responsible for managing electrification funds. And these are either collected through levies or budget allocations. And you have national utilities who are in charge of grid-based electricity connections. You have private companies, sometimes managing publicly owned electricity grids and concessional arrangements. So they don't own the infrastructure, but they have a concession to operate those grids. You have private companies who own and manage their own small electricity generation and distribution, for example, grid developers. And then you have private companies marketing standalone solar PV solutions, off-grid solar company. So those are the firms. And then this next slide looks at some of the lock-in mechanisms in the electrification industry. One of them is the belief that universal grid-based electricity coverage is the long-term objective. Essentially, most governments or electrification agencies are targeting grid-based electricity coverage, universal grid-based electricity coverage. However, this long-term mission ignores the financial viability of grid-based electricity supply, which is highly unlikely outside of urban and peri-urban areas. And a good example is Kenya, where we would, if looking at the Kenya Power financial statements, one realizes that 70% of the revenue comes from commercial and industrial consumers, who represent less than 20% of the customers connected. The other lock-in mechanism is off-grid solar business models are based on selling products as opposed to electricity services, which then means that low-income households are unable to afford larger systems because they have to pay a large upfront deposit, and perhaps the repayment installments are more than they can afford. However, if this was being offered as a service, then it would be more affordable. Mini grids are typically designed to interconnect to the main grid. However, this implies that these mini grids have to be AC, and the standards requirements for those mini grids are based on AC mini grid design. And so it might not be applicable for all mini grids and microgrids. And also it ignores the benefits of DC microgrids, especially in areas where it's unlikely the grid will interconnect in near term. And then the last element of TEF is looking at what are the selection pressures of the external environmental pressures faced by different firms. And so we'll go through the 5 different firms we identified and just give an overview. The Electrification Agency, they're competing for international funds, whether they're grant or debt from development agencies and development banks for electrification. Of course, multiple countries and all of them are chasing the same funds to do electrification. And the resources that are available need to be stretched to meet the electricity access targets, and often they're not. These resources are not sufficient. National utility, rural electrification, especially grid extension projects, result in increased operational management costs without a concomitant increase in revenue from newly connected customers, who mostly are low consumption customers. And then also because most utilities are predominantly government owned, then they also have to find a balance between profitability and public service, which of course is being driven. distribution grid concessionaires, of course, the grids that they are getting concessions for are normally the most economically viable. So the good grids are taken by national utility. And so they struggle to make electricity distribution profitable, especially in areas with economic activity. And they also struggle to invest in grid densification and intensification using the resources. Mini-grid developers, of course, have to raise capex to develop and expand mini-grid projects, and of course, the different challenges for generation and distribution investments. Most of them related, for instance, to when the national grid will arrive. And then, of course, similarly to distribution grid concessionaires, they are typically working in areas with low economic activity, and they struggle to make electricity distribution a profitable business. Off-grid solar companies, the pay-go model has seen some successes. However, it does have some challenges. It requires high operational costs, which then tends to sacrifice portfolio quality to pursue portfolio size, and the working capital requirements are typically very high. Right. So to finalize, I mean, Gilles, he's postulating that because firms are continuously responding to economic and socio-political environments, then certain changes in these external environments can result in firms breaking free of lock-in mechanisms. We finalize by just explaining three of these potential pressures that might result in firms breaking out. One is the delay in implementation of on-grid electrification plans due to phasing of projects and investment funding plans, so investment funding gaps. And this will likely result in an increased consideration of pre-electrification strategies, essentially providing people with access before the grid arrives. And these pre-electrification will create additional opportunities for off-grid approaches, but also require alternative delivery models. For off-grid solar pre-electrification, it implies that systems should reliably provide electricity service until the grid arrives. And where the lifetime of the solar PV system is shorter than the time it takes for the grid to arrive, then strategies need to ensure that the consumer continues to get reliable electricity service, which essentially means that this might result in companies having to look at a more service-based approach than a product-based approach to selling. Large-scale on-grid electrification programs are likely to extend national electricity utilities as a result of rapid increase in the number and spread of new customers. And this will probably see a greater role for small private power distributors. Right, so I am going to stop there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to me, and I knew a little bit of your work, but this is really insightful to me. I would like to hand over to Elias or Mamadou, whoever is taking over as a discussant.
Okay, thank you very much. And I must say that in the first place, we were not able to have access to the full paper to really study and also make very useful contributions and recommendations for improving the paper. However, we do have a look at the summary of the paper, and it gives us an idea about what the paper actually entails, especially regarding the presentation as well. I also want to say that studying mini-grid operations in Tanzania or East Africa has been one of the subjects that we have also been undertaking for the past few years. So we kind of have a fair idea of the situation on the ground. And we really appreciate the work done by Charles and Foreign in order to really summarize or put the issues, the main challenges in the right perspective. So, and also following the presentation, I could also say that the presentation is well structured, the actual works that have been done by previous actors have also been well captured, and also to put the paper in the right perspective, because we believe that given the presentation, the paper will follow such a similar structure. So, like I said, we will not be able to make specific useful recommendations at this point, only given the fact that we didn't have access to the main paper yet, but we believe that we could have subsequent discussions given our experience in studying the issues in East Africa, to exchange ideas and see how we can both improve our various papers. Because I also noticed that some of the issues captured in this particular presentation are issues that I also be addressing. So we sort of like have a common interest that we can all interact among ourselves. And then I want to ask that just one question, and that has to do with the lifespan of mini-grid projects, because I understand from the presentation, I also saw it in the review, that sometimes it takes long for grid extension projects to get to certain areas, and also as a way of strategy to pre-electrify those particular regions, they sort of like use the mini-grid or off-grid projects. However, your paper did state that sometimes the lifespan of some of these mini-grid projects are shorter, and it takes so long a time for the grid projects to get there. So I don't quite understand that particular bit of the paper. If you can maybe throw more light on it, that would be very useful. And I also want to ask if you have any idea about some of the challenges that most mini-grid operators face in East Africa, especially regarding the issues that have to do with electricity electricity rates, and that makes that sort of sometimes disincentify investment as well. So maybe if you want to comment a little bit on that. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Elias. I mean, just to give a broad response. Again, a lot of these are preliminary findings, which essentially means we're not capturing all the possible social, political, and economic challenges in this presentation. Okay. But hopefully, we'll do this a bit more comprehensively in the paper itself. But again, to your second question, you're right. A lot of the challenges to do mini-grids, especially private mini-grid development or development of mini-grids by private companies, has to do with policies and regulations around mini-grids. And we'll go a bit into detail, hopefully, in the paper.
Okay. All right.
Okay, if I could ask for a question or give a comment on this as well. I think we have the time as if we use the break for our presentations, and I'm sure you all would agree with this. So I actually, one thing that came to my mind, I was wondering about, because I'm not too familiar with the framework of GES, was how time constants have an impact on this, because as far as I understand, this is just a picture, like a snapshot you take, right? And one moment. But things change, of course, and if one thing changes, this is somehow causally linked to others, and so this is I was thinking about the causal loop diagram or things like this that could be maybe relevant in this sense here as well. But maybe you have already thought about this, how time influences, or is there any time aspect in this framework also?
Charles, please go ahead. You take that, and maybe I have to add something.
All right, no problem. Yeah, I think what you're referring to is what Christian calls the fourth dimension. And you can imagine when you're trying to do a complex analysis, the more dimensions you add, the more complex it becomes to explain. And so, I mean, for our paper, we're starting, we're ignoring the fourth dimension at this stage. hopefully, once we do the paper, we get a clearer picture and see how then to integrate this new fourth dimension in terms of, over time, what changes and how does that affect, the social, political, and economic as well. But at this stage, we are trying to avoid that complexity. I'll hand over to
Yeah, thanks, Charles. What we have certainly seen, and therefore we actually spent also some time to reviewing current or past literature, is that there's definitely a time component, and we will have to actually see, as Charles said, to avoid the complexity of bringing in all the different time perspectives, because what we have seen in East Africa, that national electrification and different approaches have changed a lot over the last 10 to 20 years. And of course, we cannot really summarize everything in this one paper. But yeah, it's a very interesting perspective, the time component. So we certainly have to somehow address it, but it's still ongoing. So thanks for putting the finger on it again. Thanks.
Okay, sorry, no worries. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to both of you and Elias as a discussant. And I think I hand over to Elias now, considering the time. So it's okay. And please feel free to share your screen then.
Just a minute. Okay. Okay. So is my screen up, please?
Yes, we see it. Thanks.
Okay, let's go to the presentation mode. Oh, sorry. Okay. There's a bit of. Okay, sorry. Yes, thank you very much again. And then my name is Elias, as you all know, and my collaborators are Mamadou Barry and Professor Anna Creti of Dauphine University. And this research, or this paper, was produced under the auspices of Climate Economics Chair in Paris. So we'll be talking about the profitability of mini-grid projects in Tanzania. And our paper is basically motivated by the need to increase the electricity access rate in Sub-Saharan Africa. And as most of us are aware, electricity access is a huge challenge in Sub-Saharan Africa. About 600 million people do not have access to electricity, and 79% of firms in the region had to rely on self-production of electricity due to unreliable power supply. And the situation is even more severe in rural communities compared to the urban regions where the access gap is wider. And basically, this is just due to the dispersed settlement nature of the various rural communities. So extending grid access to those areas are now very, like in terms of financial feasibility and not economical in the short run. So off-grid projects are considered as pre-electrification mechanisms or for increasing or bridging the electricity access gap in those particular regions, especially in the rural communities. So the IEA estimates that to cost Sub-Saharan Africa as a whole about $120 billion per annum to provide reliable electricity supply in Sub-Saharan Africa. So for us, this clearly signifies an opportunity for private investment, because given the economic situations in most Sub-Saharan Africa, it is less likely that the various governments will be able to meet these huge investment requirements in the electricity or the power sector per year. So there is a need for incentive regulations in order to attract these private investors. So given this background, sorry, just a minute. So given this background, we try to assess the profitability of mini-grid projects in Tanzania. And we chose Tanzania because Tanzania within the past 10 years has more than doubled its electricity access rate, and also has put in place structured and world standard regulatory system to govern the operations of mini grid projects in the country. And they've done that mainly, I mean, they've been able to improve their electricity access rate mainly through the deployment of mini grid, as you can see on the slide on the left side. So basically the Tanzania have been able to more than double its electricity access, and they've done that mainly through the use of mini grid projects compared to other countries within the region. And they've also have in place some financial systems or policies, initiatives in place to just support local developers and also to help other private developers to extend electricity access rate to rural communities. And this is basically supported by other multilateral donors like the World Bank and other NGOs. And also what is very interesting about Tanzania is that they have a well-developed mini grid deployment plan, as you can see on the right side of the slide, the map over there. So this is basically extracted from the GIS portal of Tanzania, which actually clearly states the various regions or the various areas within the country that are suitable for various types of mini grid projects. So as you can see here, we have areas that are suitable for hydro mini grid projects, areas that are suitable for biomass, areas that are suitable for fossil fuel or diesel mini grid projects, solar plants, and also a hybrid. And the hybrid basically has to do with just a combination of either two of the projects. So given this information, we thought it wise that it would be interesting to study Tanzania to see in the first place what policy lessons can be adopted for other countries, and also to see, given all these initiatives, does it suffice to make mini grid projects financially sustainable from a private sector investment perspective? So, and then we decided to study Mafinga town in Tanzania, and we chose this particular town as our case, as our specific location for the study, because it is interesting that given the high solar irradiant intensity of this particular region, as we can see here, on the right side of the slide, this is Iringa region where Mafinga town is located in Tanzania, and it has one of the highest solar irradiance in the entire country. But it's amazing that only about 92% of the population in this particular town do not have access to electricity. And there's also no grid extension to this particular area. So we are talking about 4,424 households, only approximately 8% of them have access to electricity. And basically that's through the off-grid projects and some solar home projects. So we thought it wise to understand from a perspective of private off-grid project operator, would it be financially sustainable to operate an off-grid project or invest in an off-grid project in this particular town in Tanzania? So we use the Rural African Load Profile tool to estimate the potential load from the various for that particular town. And also we use, in the first place, this is the load profile that we are considering. So we first consider the household load, which peaks around the evening time. And we also consider both the public sector and then the entire community as a whole load profile. So we use HOMA to simulate and also optimize the potential electricity supply to meet this particular load, and also to calculate the levelized cost for supplying the electricity to that particular town. And then we compare the levelized cost with the approved rate from the national regulator for mini grid program, because one of the things we also identified is that they had a well-structured regulatory system to govern mini grid operations. So they have approved rates for various mini grid projects based on their various resources or the capacity of various mini grid projects. So we thought it wise to investigate the profitability of a proposed mini grid project from this perspective. And then one of the challenges, as we are all aware about mini grid operations in East Africa or Africa as a whole, is the issue of commercial risk, which basically has to do with the potential of the various the various consumers to pay for the power or the cost of power, especially from off-grid projects, and also the productive use of power, because that's also another challenge that most developers face, because they invest in a project, but the people are not using the power, especially productively. So they face an issue of economy of scales and all that from that particular situation. So this is one of the issues that we identify. So we try to use the economic buoyancy vector to assess the commercial risk of mini-grid projects. And economic, so because of time, I will not be able to go a bit more details into the methodology, but the levelized cost is just dividing the total annualized cost of the project by the energy saved to meet the load. And also we consider 3 power plants projects. We consider the diesel, which is a fossil fuel, PV, which is a renewable, and then the hybrid of them. And then this is just a proposed system design for our mini-grid project. So the economic buoyancy vector gives us an idea of the economic, it's just like a proxy for understanding the economic status of the entire communities and also the wealth status of the various households. And then this map is actually adopted from the World Resource Institute with permission. And basically it just gives us the various areas in Tanzania based on their economic activities in those regions to throw more light of the possible risk or the ability of various households and the community to use power productively and also to pay for the power that they use. And then this is Iriga town here again, which happens to be one of the areas in Tanzania with high economic buoyancy vector, and that is even consistent with our estimation as well. And we use the livestock ownership, modern roofing sheet materials, and electronic ownership to sort of like a proxy to assess the financial status of various households, especially whilst we are looking at a rural community. Your ability to own some of these properties and stuff kind of give an idea of your economic situation in those particular households. And also you can see that there's a livestock attract just 26% because I mean, it attracts a weight of just 1% because livestock ownership is something that is common in East Africa, especially in rural communities. So our results suggest that it's not profitable to operate a mini-grid project in Tanzania, basically because in the first place, we find that our hybrid project is the least cost project and it requires at least 32 cents per kilowatt hour to break even. And the approved rate for selling electricity in Tanzania is just 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you do the mathematics, you realize that they'll be making a loss of approximately $1 million per annum, which we don't find very profitable. We also notice, as you can see on the graph on the right side, that the contributions of the various cost components to the levelized cost under the generator system, the fuel accounts for more than 50% of those costs, and then the CapEx account for more than 50% of the renewable and the PV system. So given this information, we try to understand how would these dynamics change or how would it impact the profitability of the project if we vary some of these cost components. So we considered a discount factor reduction because our base case scenario, we considered a discount factor of 10%. So we reduced that to 3% to see how would that affect the project. And also, we also considered a capacity, we introduced a capacity shortage of 15%, which basically means that we'll provide electricity for just 22 hours a day, and also consider the future cost of the power systems to understand how all these factors would impact on the profitability of the project. Now the future cost, because as we are aware, the cost of renewable technologies is declining at a very high rate. So in the near future, we want to see whether the projects will be sustainable financially. And then we find that it's only under all these 3 systems that at least the PV system will be profitable, and that will be providing electricity at a rate of 8 cents per kilowatt hour and make a possible profit of 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And given this situation, we again beg to differ because in the first place, given the investment climate in Sub-Saharan Africa, the risk associated with most of the investment, most developers will prefer to sort of like discount their cash flows at the rate of the interest rate that they anticipate to receive on their investment over the period, over the life cycle of the project. And for our project, we're considering a life cycle of 20 years. So it will be less likely to find an investor who wants to discount its cash flows as 3%. Meanwhile, the cost of capital in those areas is far above the 3%, something around 10 to 15%. So given this information, we would want to conclude that it is not feasible financially to operate a mini grid privately owned off-grid project in Tanzania. And also a lot of researchers also argue that there's a need to subsidize the projects. However, given the quantum or the amount of loss that we are envisaging, if you have to implement several of these projects across the country, it means that to put so much financial burden on the government. So we rather advocate or argue that, excuse me. Sorry, I know my time is up, but let me just spare just 2 minutes to conclude on this. We rather advocated that there's the need for the various government to sort of like invest in economic empowerment projects and income generative activities in order to help or provide job opportunities for the various communities to earn an income and also to pay for the cost reflective of the cost reflective rates of the various power. And this also help a productive use of power, because that's also another challenge. So it's sort of like you're solving two problems with just one initiative. That's how we look at it. And also there's a need to review the electricity tariff, because some of the things that we find that off-grid, there's no specific electricity tariff for off-grid projects. They were all classified as mini-grid projects. So most of the mini-grid projects in Tanzania in the first place are embarked upon by private owners who basically want to provide a reliable power supply for their subsidiary companies. So, and also their basic motivation is not to make profit, but rather to just supply the electricity need for their own company. So it will not be wise to compare such a power project with other power projects and then give them equal rates to sell electricity to consumers. And also, we also noticed another thing that is very interesting is that most of the mini grid projects, some of them are connected to the grid. So when they produce excess power, they're able to sell that to the grid and also buy power during downtime. So this helps those mini grids to stay afloat. And most of these mini grid projects are not basically from profit perspective, but rather from private ownership perspective. So if you want to look at a mini grid project or for off-grid electrification in Tanzania, then there's the need for government to review the tariff to reflect the cost of those mini grid operators. And also, we, as a recommendation, we also would like to state that the government should also consider expanding the load facilities to off-grid producers in order to enable them to access loan due to the high capital intensive nature of some of these projects. There's a need to expand load facilities at a lower rate that will enable them to embark on some of these projects and make considerable or reasonable returns on their investment. And as a future project, we are looking at combining different business models such as the grid and then the off-grid projects, and to see how we can be able to optimize the system to deliver electricity at a lower rate. Because the main challenge we find is that the ability of consumers to pay for the power. So if the regulator increases the rates, the issue is would the various consumers be able to afford it? So these are some of the challenges that we find, and we are looking forward to address in the next subsequent research. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank you again for this opportunity and my collaborators, Mamadou and Professor Anna Creti. And I'm very happy to welcome your questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elias. That was really very interesting research you've already done there. And I think also Marco and Guglielmo are probably very excited as you deal with the same country. I will try to be a bit short on my discussion to leave them some time to have questions also. So to review a little bit is that you with your research, you try to detect you detected an investment gap in rural mini grids. And for these three pathways we have, so to say, for ownership being community-based, utility or national-based, and the private sector-based, you say that the latter would must be attracted in order to close this investment gap somehow. And you considered Tanzania for your study, as far as I understood. Tanzania, from the last developments there, acts kind of like a role model, or should kind of like act like a role model in this mini grid deployment in this area. And so this is a good case to analyze how this private sector is actually attracted for other countries then. And well, I really liked your approach for this, because you did an investment calculation, but not only calculating LCOE and compare them with actually received revenues, but also with the commercial risk factor you integrated here, which makes it a very much more realistic, this calculation. And well, at the end, you were when you were reviewing, I was having, and I'm not sure if you already pointed out in this direction. I had a question when you were talking about the demand and subsidies in combination. That is, for me, there is always ringing a bell in case of that we are discussing sometimes that such projects can only be viable if the demand would increase somehow. And I was thinking, is this something you could also maybe integrate in this in a scenario where you vary the demand to see what happens there, or is something happens on the figures at the end? Is it more viable? And if so, maybe how to use this as a subsidy, is to say the willingness to pay or the ability to pay is very low. Subsidies could also be used on the other hand side, for the demand side, to increase demand by spreading vouchers, for example, was one proposition here. So is this something you would suggest probably to take a look into also?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so basically, the main challenge in that particular regard is that most of the developers, the main challenge is, in terms of the demand, when the demand is very low, the developers cannot take advantage of economies of scale. So that is one of the challenge regarding the demand. So we tried to model by sort of like increasing the load demand from that particular region, and yes, it will only have a significant effect if you have a very high demand. Then in that way, because the solar PV sometimes oversize its capacity just to ensure reliable power supply. So in that situation, we'll be able to minimize the cost, the levelized cost, and which will be able to deliver electricity at a lower rate. And so that's one of the challenges that we face. And that's how come we factored in the capacity shortage in order to reduce the capacity and see how the excess load that the PV produce will be able to sort of offset the increasing cost by reducing the levelized cost of the project. And that was how come we find that the cost of the project reduced from, I'm not sure, okay, that the cost of the project reduced from a rate at maybe 42 kilowatt per kilowatt to almost around 10, 15 thereabout, because of the excess power that is being produced by the PV system, because we constrain it to meet the load. It produces too much in order to do that. So the demand is a strong factor in terms of affecting the rate at which the various producers to sell the power. Now, the issue about subsidy, we only question the validity of subsidies, because sometimes the subsidies are meant to really, the subsidies are mainly put in place to help the various to address the issues of the income gap, among certain group. But sometimes we also find that some of these subsidies do not actually end up reflecting in the to address the issues that they are meant to address, but rather other people tend to benefit from it. And also the other issues that we raised is that imagine a loss of almost about $1 million per annum. And you are having several of, this is just one particular town, and you're having several of these projects scattered across the entire region in Tanzania. It means that there'll be huge financial burden on the government to provide subsidies for all these projects. So instead, what would be the best model in order to address this particular challenge, given the huge financial issue burden that will be on the government? So to address the demand side, which will bring down the cost, rather invest in income generating activities. So there'll be maybe sawmills or irrigation projects. So this will be driving the demand up. And then the people are also using this to earn an income for themselves. So on the one hand, the demand will go high, the rates will come down, and also you're also empowering the residents with also economic activities to earn an income to pay the cost reflective rates of the various power systems. That's what we think will be an appropriate model to adopt by the various governments. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to follow your research on this. I think the second paper you already mentioned will deal with this. Considering time, Marco, would you mind to limit to one question for a minute? I think you have several.
I might also go do it in another moment. Don't worry. No,
but feel free
it's very
to
interesting to have other views of where we were doing. I will try to keep the direct contact with Elias.
Okay, if this is okay, thank you. Then I at least have the opportunity to start before the actual break would start. Thank you, Elias, very much, and thank you also to your co-authors. I'm really looking forward to keep on track with your research here in this exciting country also. Then it's my turn to present, and thank you. Okay, does the screen sharing work? Yeah, okay, perfect. So I will shift a little bit the focus on what we've talking about from the financial. I will also shift my focus to the main screen here. Sorry for now looking at this direction here, but I will shift from this financial focus we had towards a technical perspective of mini grids rather than than financing here. For this, I want to present insights into a multi-criteria analysis of hydrogen in rural sub-Saharan mini grids as a first step in our research, how to integrate hydrogen in such mini grids or to assess the potential. And I will directly for this dive into the technical concept of hydrogen integration in mini grid to show that we have basically two options how to integrate hydrogen here. On the left-hand side, you see the energy system. You must not completely understand in the first place here, but you should just take away that we have two options. The first one being that we can decentralize produce hydrogen by any renewable energy resource, convert it by the means of an electrolyzer into hydrogen. And the second one would be that we purchase external produced hydrogen. Today's case, this hydrogen could be produced or would probably be produced by natural gas reforming, but in future perspective, this could be large-scale electrolysis also. And this hydrogen must in the mini grid then be converted by the means of a fuel cell into DC current. So again, DC mini grids more in favor here, by the way, and releasing also waste heat at low temperature level as an additional use. Also as additional use is that you could use hydrogen, or you can actually as clean cooking fuel, mobility fuel, or as a fertilizer. But we will today focus on what's incorporated here in the red dashed line and also the external hydrogen supply, so the power supply. And for this, it's actually important when we talk about hydrogen technologies that it's important to notice that these are not only technical concepts, but already deployed in the field. And this is a concept where all of this in the red dashed line is incorporated in this container deployed by Tiger Power in rural Uganda mini grids in 2018. So, but ever since technically mature, the discussions about hydrogen technologies have most often been limited to technical or economic considerations. But we propose to again open the floor at the stage for also social and environmental considerations in this. And therefore, as this first step, I said, we applied a multi-criteria decision analysis to hydrogen in rural mini grids. Which means that we compare the technologies with others in the same setting with power generation technologies. So from this scheme here, how the MCDA process in general looks like, it has basically the steps that in the first place, we select criteria to compare the hydrogen technologies with. Second one, we define the technologies. Yeah. The second one, we define criteria in which we want the technologies to be evaluated against each other and assign scores according to recent data we can find, and weight these criteria because not all of the criteria might be equally important. And therefore, we introduce scenarios. Which leaves us with a technology ranking showing for each scenario which is the most suitable technology and which one is the least suitable technology. And by varying these weights in criteria scores, we can then derive key success factors for technologies. In our case, we do this for hydrogen technologies. So very short about our MCDA technologies. We consider such that have been scalable up to 1 megawatt, as we defined this to be a mini grid in sub-Saharan Africa in our research here, and currently relevant in sub-Saharan mini grids with at least a demonstration site. Also, the technologies must not be restricted to like tidal current power, so, for example, to very extreme specific condition. And we found 6 technologies being established today as the diesel generator, microgas, biogas, wind, micro hydro, and solar PV. And for the hydrogen technologies, we distinguish between just the fuel cell being implemented in the mini grid, which means that we have external hydrogen supply, today's case from natural gas reforming, as I said, and prospectively in probably that will be large-scale water electrolysis, and the one where we consider as a whole technology in the sense a decentralized hydrogen system, also already converting electricity into hydrogen in the first place. Considering the time, I will not go through this in too much detail, but how you find these criteria is always associated to literature review and how something to synthesize the set, because there are a wide set of criteria, obviously, to apply to such evaluations. We use statistical analysis for this, which we must not go into detail now, but we came up with 15 criteria to compare the technologies with. These technologies were majorly, we could sort into a technical, economic, environmental, and social dimension here. And I will illustrate some of them while already marking, with respect to time, strengths and weaknesses of hydrogen technologies. So these hydrogen technologies, and especially the fuel cell, is very strong, performs very strong in technical dimensions, which means that, as I said, we have the ability to serve multiple end users with hydrogen. Resource availability is high because it's also very flexible. The capacity factor of the technology, which means the actual runtime against the potential one, is very high compared to renewables, especially. And the ability to respond to demand is outstanding. It's very dynamic, especially PEM electrolyzers and fuel cell. But the technologies also perform very low in economic dimensions. The LCOE we have for this to compare it, as it combines a lot of other parameters here. And also in environmental considerations compared to other technologies, we have to say, as we found that the life cycle GHG emission and human health effect from social dimension is majorly affected by mining for the resources that are incorporated in the technologies. So compared to other technologies, they perform very low, and also in the impact on water resources, obviously, there's a use it above the life cycle here. So we finally then proposed 3 different scenarios to evaluate the performance of hydrogen technologies depending on the weights applied to these 15 criteria and the scores assumed in this. And at first, we aimed to detect strategically important criteria estimated by academic experts. So therefore, we approached actually 18 experts, received responses from 19, where we, amongst others, asked them to rank the 15 criteria according what they think is most important from 1 to 15. And these average, the average rankings, we normalized again and applied to our calculations. Just to give you an idea, the key criteria estimated by experts were the ability to respond to demand, resource availability, ability to serve multiple end users, social acceptance of the technology, and the economic performance. Second scenario we constructed is that we looked into PV and diesel generator that are currently used in this field, where they have specific strength in, and increase the weights in such criteria to see how hydrogen technologies would perform when actually market decisive criteria are weighted more. We found for the diesel generator, it performs very good in resource availability, maturity, also market, not only technical, and ability to respond to demand. And the PV for job creation potential and social acceptance. And we finally, we constructed a future scenario where we assume the external hydrogen to be supplied by water electrolysis, decrease resource availabilities of fossil fuels, hydro and biomass, and the decrease of renewable LCOE as expected by the International Energy Agency, and the weights we derived according to the SDGs. So for example, the electrical efficiency is directly addressed by SDG 7.3, and so on. So we thought this is a future scenario how sustainable development must be achieved. So in our paper, and I will briefly walk this through in this presentation, but we will focus on the key takeaways here. We will always have such a comparison here where we actually have the different technologies. Decentralized hydrogen system here for DHS, and FC is the only the fuel cell with external hydrogen supply. All the technologies on a scoring system where 1 would be the most the best, or closer to 1 are the most suitable technologies, and close to 0 the less suitable. And we always include an equal weight where all criteria would be equally weighted to see the impact of actually our scenarios. So our for the first case where we introduce weights according to the expert ranking, we can, as key takeaway, have that hydropower is most deteriorated when applying these weights, but biogas and diesel improve in comparison with the other technologies. And actually that despite the LCOE, both the external supplied fuel cell and the decentralized fuel cell rank second and first. So actually they meet exactly these strategically important criteria, except for economic performance. Considering time, second scenario for the market dominant technology, so where we increase the weights that PV and diesel generator perform good in such criteria, we see that except for PV, all other renewable energies seem to be deteriorated, but PV dominance is confirmed, which means that the analysis is just simply correct here. But we also see that fuel cell, again, and the decentralized hydrogen solution perform very well compared to other technologies, as they combine criteria from both the diesel generator, such as the ability to respond to demand, but also they're socially accepted, not as high as PV, but as they are renewable energy, they are somehow. And for the final future scenario, we can derive from this actually that we think in future fossil fuels will not be competitive anymore in mini grids. Micro hydropower to be the most suitable one in such locations where we actually have resources for it. It's important news. And that again, the hydrogen technologies, when we consider this, all of the criteria perform very good. Actually, the one that we think could be supplied by external large-scale produced water electrolyzers performs better than the decentralized ones. So for our conclusion and for our takeaway for the research, considering this multidimensional development, but not only economics or technical perspective, the hydrogen technologies meet criteria estimated to be important. And so the potential fit for rural mini-grid application can be assumed, for sure, I think. And this future scenario supports this idea. But however, when economic parameters are decisive, and we cannot lie, it is often the case, only future large-scale hydrogen production, we assume, could create competitiveness to other technologies in the setting. as this is not really in the hand of mini-grid developer, this is a very capital intensive and political will affected. We propose, and we actually do, to define economic needs and quantify them. How high must seasonality, for example, be? Or what about how to remunerate grid services so that decentralized production could also be feasible with energy systems optimization approach. And we would like to analyze the associated impact on the power grid, actually, if this is feasible, and for sure also for the connection. And finally, I know I'm ahead of time, but I'm a bit above time, but I will want to use 1 more minute, and I'm not sure if I get killed for this in the afterwards discussion or if it's of value, but I feel that to address something that has recently gained increasing attention and was also mentioned here in the conference already, and just in case Bill Gates is looking to, so there's a discussion about something called small nuclear power or SMR or whatever. And so I want to make sure that here in this setting of rural sub-Saharan Africa, as they are proposed for off-grid regions, that even if we once more ignore all the criteria except for economics or the impact metrics from Daniel Kamen this morning, actually, that the technologies must not today and for sure not for future be discussed for the application in rural sub-Saharan Africa. So looking at the LCOE here, actually, which is seem to be the strength for small nuclear power compared to our technologies from this we found from actual deployment here, you see that the LCOE for such systems, they significantly increase when you decrease the scale. And so far, there's only one concept. All of those are concepts, but not technically deployed somewhere. Is the Aurora powerhouse, with coming close to what we consider in our studies here from 1 megawatt. And yeah, they must be somewhere above 3 megawatts estimated here, so somewhat above $3 per kilowatt hour, which is, I think, enough to say that I am happy to know that we will never have to deal with this technology in the context of rural sub-Saharan mini-grids. And yeah, with this kind of anecdote, I would like to close here again and yeah, come back to hydrogen and to the actual topics probably relevant in this setting. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Nikolas. I will give some feedbacks from my side. So I really find intriguing the complementarity of different technologies rather than the exclusivity. So the potential to link these fuel cells technologies to other sources and evaluating the difference in linking it with the natural production of hydrogen and different sources of hydrogen production. Focusing on the scenarios you presented, it's interesting to see that the photovoltaic solutions are winning in terms of market, though the complexity of the market might be a relevant factor considering the quality, as we mentioned before, or the affordability of the product itself, and not only at initial investment and not only at the level of energy, the cost of energy after on. The fuel cells win in terms of comparison from experts, but the time frame for the implementation is extremely long for sure, and the regulatory framework must be developed, the market must be developed. So it's interesting to use this data to guide discussions and to see if it could impact the decisions at regulatory level. The result of the future scenario showing that hydropower has a comparable benefit is interesting also. Also seeing that hydropower technologies is a controversial issue right now, considering the river restoration initiatives or productivity of very small scale plants which do not have a harming effect on ecosystems. So it's interesting. What I would like to insist on is on the contributing to increase the complexity of the multi-criteria analysis. So for example, on the economic level, it could be interesting to add more aspects, not only relating to the cost, but also to the complete capacity to build a market for the technology, so to a more value chain based approach. And also it's interesting to understand how the set of indicators could be improved, knowing that decision makers have to focus on different problems at the same time. So there's a clear focus on SDG 7, so promoting affordable, reliable, sustainable access to energy sources, but we also have to combine it with several different needs. And for example, biogas responds to this in a positive way, combining both water sanitation and ecosystem protection, let's say, together with the energy production. So it's interesting to say how different benefits could be evaluated, not only on the energy provision side. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this feedback. Actually, I think you pointed out two very very key factors in this analysis, right? First one would be that you open the floor for more than just the microcosmos, so to say, of this microgrid, for having more in taking a closer look also into things you mentioned. I think the value chain and these kind of things, where you open more from not just thinking in this small box of the actual microgrid. And this is something we for sure must do in follow-up research, not only to include the lifetime of components, but also in small scale, that we then go back into energy systems, so to say, and not just technologies. So this was to be the first approach to assess, so to say, if there is any justification actually for these technologies, because this was not discussed in this multidimensional approach. And yes, then again, we must think, if the technology fits, where's the energy system then for it, or not the energy system, but also the economic system for it. So this is a very good point. And about the second, to how to include more indicators, so to say, for this is something very important. And what we actually did, because you see that you already see that this MCDA here for Sub-Saharan Africa, it also has its limitations. Considering hydropower, for example, we find, okay, hydropower there is very suitable technology, but it's certainly linked or restricted to these areas where we actually have the resource, right? And if not, it's not a question. So to tailor it to different settings then, and sharpen it on this. And we wanted to leave open a little bit this to also include new criteria or indicators here, which why we use the specific techniques especially for the ranking system. We is asked in a way that allows us to, at a later stage, probably include new or just delete criteria and use new ones where you have accurate data on. So, and this would not all be falsified, and you not only have to do the survey again, like the whole survey, but only in parts, and or maybe with a little bit of distortion. And yeah, I think I'm really looking forward to do this probably for more precise settings at some point. Yeah.
It's really interesting, and I believe it's a good grounding point to analyze the effect at a mesoscale, not really at the micro scale, to see the feasibility in these different sectors. So talking about mini grids, but at municipal level rather than at small community level. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Yes, and at this point, I think when we go this deep into this specific context, then it makes actually sense to talk about this energy system then and behavior. And I mean, we've at this conference especially, we've talked so much about grid connection and these kind of things, potential grid connection of the mini grid. And I think this is something then this must take into account, and where we need to find a way how to combine multi-criteria analysis with probably energy system modeling, power grid simulation, some sort of this, and we will probably find a way for this.
as a last comment, I really find useful your comparison with the small reactor for nuclear energy, because it's something that is often considered a renewable source, but it's a very debatable topic. And I find it interesting to compare two technologies that are, let's say, that have a complexity factor. So hydrogen fuel cells are, of course, way more simple and more easy to install and have less problems, but it's good to see that the comparison also shows that the financial benefit is clear, not only the safety and sustainability factor.
Yes, then is of course there's the question how to quantify the others than the economics in the sense of a technology that currently does not exist. Now to quantify this monetary, and I think this is a huge discussion. I'm not sure I want to open this now, or I'm sure I don't want to open this now, but I think it made pretty much clear that we don't need to open this discussion, at least for this specific application here. So thank you for your comment. Okay. Okay, I think unless there is a raising hand from Mazzà, yeah.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Can I ask a question, actually? Just wondering, actually, this hydrogen fuel energy system, how about the storage capacity things, actually? So compared to the battery system?
It's not compared to the battery system here. As I mentioned, we think of it as a technology. So the fuel cell here is just the fuel cell is considered, so to say. So just the interface of a fuel cell as a technology, and so is for the decentralized system. We think of it as the system boundaries to be including the upstream electricity generation technology, knowing that this must be PV, hydro, or whatsoever, and this must be straight out or is in the paper, because to avoid to somehow compare apples and pears here, but to see it only as a technology but not as an energy system, and so it has both negative and positive side effects in the analysis at the end. And to this battery discussion, then this is something I think we will of course address in when we now take a closer look into the energy systems and the modeling, because this is something where we need very specific, I guess, technical constraints also to discuss this, and must be taken into account. And this we will do with now with the follow-up research, where we will probably construct different energy system settings, and also the hydrogen technologies in comparison with batteries, or maybe even other more unconventional storage systems. Maybe we need to talk about things like flywheel systems again. They appear to never get that, and so this we will take into account with the modeling then.
Yeah, because if I'm not wrong, actually it's going to hit the EV technology, and then this storage is a big issue there because of the energy need to be saved in the electric vehicle, and then it can give a go compared to the power station, as you are talking. Definitely, because recently in Japan, Fukushima, I think they have recently very successfully opened the hydrogen technology in their power system. I'm telling you that IEEE Spectrum March 2021, if you can have a look, it's a publication there. So this is a good, I think this is a big hope of, green technology, no doubt. But I'm concerned about the costing, actually. Isn't so expensive that can it replace the renewable energy like mini grid, microgrid, or these sort of things? That's what I was thinking about. Because Tanzania is failed about the financial side, as Elias was saying that, so if it is costly, then how it will replace the renewable energy in all over the world?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for bringing in this vector. I think what we can learn from this morning session also, and from this conference in general, it's that we must focus a little bit, or should focus on energy services rather than energy supply also, and how to combine thinking for several approaches. And I totally agree with you that that hydrogen, not only in South but also here, has a great ability to do so, and to combine different aims with different energy vectors here. About the costs, so from our analysis here, we see that actually that the decentralized electrolysis system is, when you only compare these one figures here, it's not cost competitive at the moment, and probably will not be in the future. The meaning for overall supply, but there are certainly, for decentralized production, there are certainly niches where you can actually improve your economic benefits from. This is like from seasonal influence. There's a mini grid in La Réunion, for example, that has recently deployed because of high shares of excess electricity due to seasonal influences. They decided for hydrogen there to be installed rather than battery and other than and no other technology, as this was the least cost option, even lower cost than diesel. So there are niches for this already. This must be, I think, quantified a little bit, because it's somehow a guess. Okay, you need seasonal influence, but how much of this you would need? And this is for the decentralized production of hydrogen, and the central production of hydrogen it could then also benefit, especially from economies of scale, of course. And this is something. This is I think a great potential, that you again can produce hydrogen in one central or a few centralized plants, and deliver much easier than electricity. So that this is an advantage to just electricity, I guess.
Yeah, actually, I asked this question because the first day in the panel discussion, German ex-minister Horn, he was talking about the 50% of renewable energy already in Germany replaced the nuclear power plant, and 2022, the last nuclear power plant is going to be dumped. So she was telling that it is adjusted in that way. So I'm very hopeful, actually, these sort of things. If this hydrogen technology is coming up in that way slowly in the world, I think that should be great. That's very hopeful. I know it's still in research, and a lot of research is going on that. But it's a good presentation. I'm really very much appreciating that. It's an excellent presentation. I was looking for this thing, actually. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really, it's opened a door for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that that you enjoyed. Thank you very much. And well, I think at this point we must close. Thank you for listening to me, even it was your break. But who likes breaks? And I think we can then close the session probably.